that ensures tariff and quota-free trade and protects our close cooperation on security and law enforcement. But the UK Parliament rejected the withdrawal agreement because of their concerns about the backstop, the legal protocol to prevent no hard border in the event of our future relationship is not in place at the end of the implementation period. Now, I know that many people in Northern Ireland and indeed across this island are worried about what Parliament's rejection of the withdrawal deal means for them. So I'm here today to affirm my commitment and that of the United Kingdom government to all of the people of Northern Ireland of every background and tradition. To affirm my commitment to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, to its successors, the St Andrews Agreement and the Stormont House Agreement, and to the principles they enshrine, which is absolute. And to affirm my commitment to delivering a Brexit that ensures no return to a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, which is unshakable. I was 12 when the Troubles began and 41 when the Belfast Agreement was reached. For all my adult life, Northern Ireland has been a central political issue. The progress of the last few decades, from the Troubles to ceasefire, from ceasefire to political agreement, and from agreement to active participation by unionists and nationalists in institutions that enjoy cross-community support, has been a massive achievement and a landmark in the history of these islands. From the moment I became Prime Minister of the UK, I knew that one of my most profound responsibilities was to serve the interests of the people of Northern Ireland by doing all I could to protect and sustain that progress. Successive UK and Irish governments have played their parts, often working together in close cooperation. But it has been the political parties in Northern Ireland, the UUP and the SDLP, the DUP, Sinn Féin and the Alliance. It has been civil society groups like WAVE and Healing Through Remembering. And above all, it has been the people of Northern Ireland who have achieved by far the most. Violence has not been eliminated, but it has been reduced to levels that would once have seemed impossible to imagine. Divisions remain entrenched in some communities, but many people, including those from the younger generations, are more and more interested in putting aside those divisions to build a shared future. Thanks to greater political stability, Northern Ireland is now a leading destination for inward investment, with over 900 national businesses investing in its economic success. Employment is at a near record high, and unemployment at a near record low. And that transformation is reflected in the image that Northern Ireland projects to the rest of the world today. It is no longer one of violence, but of dynamism and success. And the decisive moment in that transformation was the Belfast Agreement in 1998. Its success was in allowing people of different traditions to feel that those traditions and their identities were respected, and that they could work together to build a successful future for all the people of Northern Ireland. It enshrined the principle that it is the birthright of all the people of Northern Ireland to identify themselves and be accepted as Irish or British or both, as they may so choose. And it enshrined the consent principle, that it will always and only be for the people of Northern Ireland to decide what their constitutional future should be, and that the UK government is solemnly committed to supporting their democratic wishes. These principles are the bedrock of peace and stability in Northern Ireland, and they will forever be honoured by the United Kingdom government. A fundamental belief in the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is part of my political heritage as a Conservative and Unionist, and that will never change. But the unionism I believe in is one that respects absolutely the central importance of Irish identity to those people in Northern Ireland who claim it. And the United Kingdom I stand for is an open and tolerant union of nations and people. A country where every religion, every peaceful and democratic creed has a place, and every man and woman is equal before the law, treated with respect, and has the opportunity to get on and succeed. Indeed, that union can only ever be secure and prosper if it is built on that respect and acceptance of difference and diversity. Because the Belfast Agreement is not just the bedrock of stability here in Northern Ireland, Its principles are fundamental to the security and success of the whole United Kingdom. Our absolute commitment to those principles has informed and directed my approach to Brexit, from my first speeches as Prime Minister to my first meetings with the Taoiseach. And in December 2017, in the joint report we agreed with the EU, we committed to protect the 1998 agreement in all its parts and to the totality of the relationships set out in it, to the avoidance of a hard border, including any physical infrastructure or related checks and controls, and to preserving the integrity of the UK internal market and Northern Ireland's place within it. These were commitments made in good faith. Our preferred approach has always been to deliver them through the future relationship. But I accepted the need for an insurance policy or bridging arrangement to guarantee no hard border if the future relationship was not in place in time, and that such a policy had to deliver legal certainty through what is called a legally operative text, so it would give people and businesses on both sides of the border clarity and confidence over how these commitments would be fulfilled. That is why I agreed to the backstop in the withdrawal agreement. And unlike the original European Commission proposal, it did not impose a customs border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Many people, businesses, farming organisations and voluntary groups in Northern Ireland agreed with me. They spoke out in support of the withdrawal agreement and they defended the backstop. I know that wasn't an easy thing to do, and I'm grateful to them for doing so. I fought hard to make the case for the deal as it stands. I believed it could command a majority in the House of Commons. But I've had to face up to the fact that in its current form it cannot, and the need for changes to the backstop is the key issue. While there were those in Northern Ireland who spoke in favour of it, it is also true that the backstop is not supported by the two main unionist parties here, and this also influenced MPs in England, Scotland and Wales in voting against the deal. I can only deliver on the commitments we have made if I can get a deal through the UK Parliament, and meetings with MPs across the House show that I can only get a deal through Parliament if legal changes are made to the backstop. And that is why the UK government and a majority of MPs from across the House of Commons supported the amendment from Sir Graham Brady last week. It reaffirms our desire to leave with a deal and our commitment to no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. And as Sir Graham himself set out, it would mean replacing the backstop with another arrangement which avoids a hard border, or making legally binding changes to the backstop to introduce a time limit or create an exit mechanism. I know that the prospect of changing the backstop and reopening the withdrawal agreement creates real anxieties here in Northern Ireland and in Ireland, because it is here that the consequences of whatever is agreed will most be felt. I recognise too that the majority of voters in Northern Ireland voted to remain, and that many will feel that once again decisions taken in Westminster are having a profound and in many cases unwanted impact in Northern Ireland and Ireland. So I'm determined to work towards a solution that can command broader support from across the community in Northern Ireland. As we do so, there are a number of commitments that will underpin our approach, and which must be part of any alternative arrangements that we seek to negotiate with the EU and pass through the UK Parliament. First, we stand by our commitment in the joint report that there will be no hard border, including any physical infrastructure or related checks and controls. And this means people on either side of that border will be able to live their lives as they do now. I've spoken to people in places like Fermanagh who remember the customs border posts, approved roads and security installations of the not-so-distant past. I've spoken to businesses who have supply chains that cross between Great Britain, Northern Ireland and Ireland. I understand how thousands of people move back and forth between Northern Ireland and Ireland every day to go to work, to visit family, even to do their shopping. I understand what a hard border would mean, not just in terms of the disruption at the border itself, but in terms of trade for the whole island. The Belfast Agreement delivers just and equal treatment for the identity, ethos and aspirations of both communities. And for many, a seamless border between Northern Ireland and Ireland is integral to delivering this. And I know this has been the cornerstone around which the community in Northern Ireland has come together to deliver peace and prosperity, and I will not do anything to put that at risk. So while I've said that technology could play a part, and that we will look at alternative arrangements, these must be ones that can be made to work for the particular circumstances of Northern Ireland. Second, neither will I compromise on my promise to protect Northern Ireland's integral place in the UK. When the European Commission proposed a version of the backstop which involved creating a customs border in the Irish Sea, I successfully resisted it, and I've ruled out any return to such a suggestion. This would not only damage the integrity of the UK's internal market, which is so vital to businesses across the UK and not least here in Northern Ireland, it would also ignore the very real concerns of many people about being cut off from the rest of the UK. Furthermore, we will also ensure there will be no new regulatory barriers between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK without Northern Ireland's institutions having their say. Third, there will be full protection for all existing cross-border cooperation. Many areas of cooperation have been identified, both those formally set out by the North-South Ministerial Council, such as cooperation on health and transport, or keeping the island of Ireland disease-free for animals and plants, and informal areas of cooperation, such as a single integrated electricity market that supplies power to everyone. Every area of existing cross-border cooperation must be respected. If these are ever to change in the future, it will be a matter for Belfast and Dublin in accordance with the three-stranded approach, not as a consequence of our EU exit. Fourth, we will uphold the rights enshrined in the Belfast Agreement for all the people of Northern Ireland right across the whole community. This includes upholding commitments around mutual respect, religious liberties, equality of opportunity, tolerance and rights. I know that there are some in the nationalist community in particular who worry that some of their existing rights could be eroded when the UK leaves the EU. So we have already enshrined in the withdrawal agreement a legal guarantee of no diminution of equality and rights. There have also been serious concerns raised about how UK immigration rules treat citizens here exercising their rights under the agreement to be Irish. The birthright to identify and be accepted as British, Irish or both, and to hold both British and Irish citizenship is absolutely central to the agreement. But I know that in some cases recently, people have encountered difficulties in securing their rights as Irish citizens to bring in family members. I understand the serious concerns that have been raised. So I've asked the Home Secretary, working closely with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, to review these issues urgently, to deliver a long-term solution consistent with the letter and spirit of the Belfast Agreement. Without a devolved government and with only unionists represented in the House of Commons, it is more important than ever that we uphold our duty to ensure all voices in Northern Ireland are heard. I take that very seriously indeed, and the UK government will always work in the interests of the whole community. So tomorrow I will be sitting down with the political parties to discuss the way forward and ensure that we can deliver for all the people of Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland does not have to rely on the Irish government or the European Union to prevent a return to borders of the past. The UK government will not let that happen. I will not let that happen. At the same time, we must continue to support all efforts that can lead towards the restoration of Northern Ireland's political institutions. And the UK government is absolutely committed to ensuring that when an executive is restored, it will have real influence to speak for all the people of Northern Ireland as we shape the UK's future relationship with the European Union. As we work to address the unique challenges that Brexit poses to Northern Ireland, so I also want to ensure that we continue to maintain, and indeed enhance, the strongest possible bilateral partnership between the UK and Ireland. I've said many times that I want to see a new, deep and special partnership between the UK and the 27 member states of the European Union. But our relationship with Ireland is deeper than our relationship with any of the other 27. It is uniquely rooted in ties of family, history and geography. The recent past has been a moment of reflection in the UK and Ireland, as we've commemorated the centenary of a series of key events in our shared history. Ireland remembered the centenary of the Easter Rising in an inclusive manner which promoted a greater understanding of our often troubled history, while our two countries remembered together the shared sacrifice of so many who fought side by side in the First World War. The ceremony at Messines in 2017, attended by His Royal Highness the Duke of Cambridge and former Taoiseach Enda Kenny, was particularly poignant, as it remembered the soldiers of the 16th Irish and 36 Ulster Division, who both played a key role in the Allied victory in that battle. Today, those ties of family and friendship between our countries are more important than they have ever been. And I believe there's a yearning in the hearts of all the people of these islands for a close and trusting relationship between all of us, and an absolute horror that we should take even a single step backwards in the progress we've collectively achieved. So I want to work closely with the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, and the Irish government, as so many of our predecessors have before, to strengthen the bilateral relationship we have built. And this can and should take many forms. We already have the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference and regular summits between UK and Irish politicians. But as we leave the European Union, we will need to establish new ways of coming together to develop further our unique relationship. For example, the Irish government have suggested annual meetings where the Prime Minister and Taoiseach, together with senior ministerial colleagues, come together to discuss the big issues of the day. We will also want to strengthen our economic relationship and have already together identified areas like construction and smart cities as ripe for enhanced collaboration. And both the UK and the Irish governments have already made clear that we would support the tantalising possibility of a joint UK and Ireland World Cup bid for 2030, should our respective football associations choose to pursue this. We also want to find creative ways of enhancing the link between all our peoples, and in particular to build the links between our young people. I know there's a sense that many British people do not know enough or understand enough about the complexity of the long relationship between the UK and Ireland, and a sense that some Irish people are less familiar with the forces and motivations that help to shape views in the UK. So as part of these new ways of coming together, I would like us to look in particular at opportunities for our young people to discuss these issues and others in a structured way, and to reflect on their vision for our future relationship. I know this is a concerning time for many people here in Northern Ireland, but we will find a way to deliver Brexit that honours our commitments to Northern Ireland, that commands broad support across the communities in Northern Ireland, and that secures a majority in the Westminster Parliament, which is the best way to deliver for the people of Northern Ireland. As we do so, I hope we can also take steps to move towards the restoration of devolution, so that politicians in Northern Ireland can get back to work on the issues that matter to the people they represent. For ultimately, the measure of this moment in Northern Ireland's history must be more than whether we avoid a return to the challenges of the past. It must be how together we move forwards to shape the opportunities of the future. As Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, it is a profound honour and duty to play my part in shaping that future, and to do my utmost to support the peace, prosperity and progress that can give the people of Northern Ireland the brightest future for generations. Thank you.
Theresa May is once again on tour, today in Northern Ireland, striving for a new deal that both Europe and MPs can accept. This afternoon, she tried to reassure people that she's still committed to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and that there'll be no hard border after Brexit.
Northern Ireland does not have to rely on the Irish government or the European Union to prevent a return to borders of the past. The UK government will not let that happen. I will not let that happen.
But many firms in Northern Ireland feel aggrieved that they backed her on her backstop, and now she and her team are trying to change it.
Prime Minister, given that many business figures in this room may feel that you betrayed and shafted them on the backstop in your recent U-turn, why should they believe any of the pledges that you made to them today in terms of avoiding a hard border?
You've used the phrase U-turn in your question. There is no suggestion that we are not going to ensure that in the future there is provision for this, as it's been called an insurance policy, the backstop, that ensures that if there is the future relationship is not in place by the end of the implementation period, there will be arrangements in place to ensure that we deliver no hard border.
And she wasn't trying to drop the backstop, she stressed, just change it.
Well, I'm not proposing to persuade people to accept a deal that doesn't contain that insurance policy for the future. What Parliament has said is that they believe there should be changes made to the backstop.
That seems to have upset the ERG group of Tory Brexiteers who've been meeting this evening. MPs voted for the Brady Amendment to replace the backstop. One ERG source said not to modify it. Earlier at the weekly cabinet, the PM told ministers not to be distracted by talk of delay and focus instead on Brexit in 8 weeks' time, which the Defence Secretary echoed.
Well, very much looking forward to delivering the legislation for the 29th of March and...
So you think you're still on?
Sure. Absolutely.
And you're confident
Totally
the deal's going to go through now?
Oh, absolutely.
This afternoon saw another round of talks on the so-called Malthouse Compromise involving Tory Brexiteers and Remainers. Do you think there'll be something ready for Theresa May's trip to Brussels on Thursday?
Well, we'll see. As I say, we're having our second meeting today. And
that's the aim, though, is it, to get something for Thursday?
Well, we've not put a specific deadline on it, but we're working through as fast as possible. Clearly, there are lots of difficult technical issues to discuss.
The group want to extend the transition period by a year to the end of 2021, either to give more time to strike a long-term trade deal or alternatives to the backstop. Thursday's a kind of deadline, surely, because Theresa May's going back to Brussels on Thursday.
Well, I'm glad you told me that. I wasn't aware of that. But there
We
we
weren't
go.
aware of that, but I mean, you must hope to get something backed up by then, surely.
We are very positive about the outcome.
As Theresa May held meetings in Belfast this evening, the DUP said the problem is still the toxic backstop. Number 10 say they're still considering either alternative arrangements or a time limit or an exit clause. It's far from clear, though, what, if anything, the Prime Minister will take to Brussels on Thursday. Well, I just come back from the Commons where the ERG meeting broke up about 10 or 15 minutes ago. Should stress it was just a regular weekly meeting, not an emergency meeting. I spoke afterwards to Marc Francois, the Vice Chairman of the group, who said that they'd resolved at the meeting to continue the negotiations with Number 10 in favour of the so-called Malthouse Compromise I was talking about earlier. However, he said, a number of colleagues in the meeting had pointed out, following Mrs May's speech, that the Brady Amendment had said that the backstop must be replaced and not tweaked. And that was the mandate we gave the Prime Minister, and we would like to see her adhere to it.
Michael Crick in Westminster. Now, the UK economy is at risk of stagnation, with escalating uncertainty over Brexit undermining business confidence. That's the message from a closely watched survey of business sentiment, which today suggested that economic output is barely growing at all. Our economics correspondent, Helio Ebrahimi, is here. What does this really tell us about the state of the economy right now?
Well, I think the data underlines the Brexit paralysis that is undermining confidence. I mean, first, those bleak numbers from the services sector that you talked about. Remember, services is 80% of the UK economy, and the latest PMI survey data, bar one, is the worst in 6 years. And not just that, it's also the sharpest drop in new business since the financial crisis. And it's not the only warning signal. There's been a report by Deloitte that shows that finance directors from companies, 4/5 of them, are now going to cut costs and limit job creation. Now, John, the reason that's important is the UK labour market has been one of the bright spots, the few bright spots of the economy. And finally, I just wanted to mention a leaked document that came out of the steel industry that shows how worried they are about a no-deal Brexit, basically choking off all their exports. I remember, John, 2 years ago, the government swooped in to rescue this industry, and now the very same companies are facing a new crisis.
Is it all about Brexit?
Well, to be fair, you know, the economic data that came out of Europe today is just as bleak. The problem is that escalating Brexit uncertainty is happening just at the time of this global economic slowdown. Essentially, what you have is, a kind of domestic chaos wrapped in a global mess, and kind of amplified by this fear that in 52 days the whole system might come to a halt.
Are we headed for a, well, I mean, recession?
And that's the big question. Nobody knows, these figures don't show it, but they point to that dangerous stagnation as you described it. You know, now an optimist would say to you, don't worry, the government will get there, they'll find a deal, and then miraculously we'll have this Brexit bounce. But the truth is that companies are already seeing the toll of uncertainty. I think it's going to be interesting to see what the Bank of England say on Thursday when they deliver their quarterly report. So far, the bank has kept to this line that Brexit is going to be orderly, it's going to be smooth, it's going to be soft. I think it's going to be very hard for them to ignore this latest series of data, and it could mean that they U-turn on their plans to raise interest rates.
Hello, Rahimi. Well, now, one of the aims of Theresa May's visit was to reassure businesses in Northern Ireland. But did it work? Declan Gormley is the managing director of Brookvent, a manufacturing and engineering business in Belfast. He joins me live now. Can I ask you the brutal question, first of all? What does the backstop mean to you as a big businessman in Northern Ireland?
Well, I think the backstop is an essential part of the withdrawal agreement. It ensures that we don't have a hard border on the island of Ireland, and it provides some security for what the future trading arrangements will be in the absence of a negotiated agreement.
Do you feel that Northern Ireland is at the heart of Mrs May's interest? Do you feel loved or do you feel neglected?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Do you feel that Northern Ireland's economic interests are at the heart of Mrs May's interest? Do you feel loved or neglected?
I think it's difficult to come to that conclusion when you see the flip-flop that's taken place from November to now. And clearly we understand that Mrs May is fighting a very difficult battle, even within her own party, to try to get the agreement across the line. But no, I can't believe that the economic interests of Northern Ireland are top of the list of priorities for her.
Could you just give us a sort of practical insight into what your business does in terms of before Brexit and after it? I mean, you currently ship loads of stuff into Europe, don't you?
Yes, I mean, Brookvent in some ways sort of represents a business which is afoot in both camps. We were 10 years ago 100% focused on selling into GB. We're having a very difficult time. 8 years later, we've just had a record year, and now nearly 60% of our business goes to export, and a significant amount of that figure is actually into Europe. So for a business like ours, it's very important that we keep the lines of movement open, that trade barriers don't exist, and that we can actually continue to do what we've been able to do very successfully for the last 8 years.
So the minimum you would want, in all honesty, would be a customs union.
Yes, a customs union and staying in the single market, I think, is the preference for the entire business community. I think one of the things which has occurred here is that the DUP are representing a particular standpoint, but I think people have to remember they don't reflect the view of the majority of people in Northern Ireland. 56% voted to remain, and they absolutely don't represent the views of the business community or the farming community. All of the major business organisations and the Ulster Farmer Union have come out clearly in favour of a backstop because of its importance to trade across the island of Ireland.
The Welsh Government today declared its diary in the Assembly for ministers to announce one by one what the impact would be of leaving the EU in 66 days without a deal. Their view is clear. They can't be ready for no withdrawal agreement, no transition period, and no agreements on trade. And the Labour First Minister went further than his leader in London, saying if there is no deal by next week, he will back a second referendum. But the biggest intervention came in Brussels, where for the first time, the European Commission said a no-deal Brexit would lead to a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, reports.
The French President and the German Chancellor were in Aachen today to proclaim the bonds between their two countries. Both hoped the Brexit divorce treaty would by now be settled, but Theresa May is signalling she is coming back to the EU soon to ask for more. In Brussels, the Commission spokesman showed patience was wearing thin.
Look, in all honesty, I have a terrible sense of déjà vu in all these exchanges. And I think I'm not the only one. The withdrawal agreement was agreed with the UK government, with the EU 27. It's now on the table. It's not open for negotiation. And we expect the United Kingdom to tell us what they want, what they really, really want.
He said the lack of a deal made the prospect of a hard border between Ireland and Northern Ireland very real.
If you like me to push me and speculate on what might happen in a no-deal scenario in Ireland, I think it's pretty obvious. You will have a hard border.
That threat of no deal has been galvanising a network of ministers and parliamentary aides to contemplate resignation.
Should there be a free vote on a no-deal Brexit?
Very unusually, one minister on their way to cabinet all but confirmed that as they broke convention and crossed the road to answer the traditionally unanswered shouted question.
I think what we're seeing is people who want to avoid no deal and people who want to deliver Brexit and people who want to avoid a people's referendum coming together to support the deal. And that is where we need to get to, because the only way to avoid no deal is to support the deal.
Are we going to see ministerial resignations?
I don't think
there's no free vote on this.
I don't think we have to see that.
Many detect Tory MPs who voted against Theresa May's deal last week, hoping to find a reason to support it second time round.
I think that enough is enough. I've made the point. I think that actually we've got to get on. And there was serious uncertainty. There's no doubt in my mind. People are very worried.
Some in the Whip's office say there are MPs out there who are looking for a good ladder to climb down. You might be one of them.
Well, I think it was important for me to say why I was against the deal. If she makes the changes, then I would be most likely to vote for it.
Those changes to the divorce deal are things Theresa May's long told MPs she can't get the EU to concede. Now she's hoping the threat of cross-party amendments that could delay Brexit by months will help win back Tory opponents of her deal.
It may well be that the people in the end who help her get this over the line are people who hold diametrically opposed views. And they're so opposed to the Brexiteer view, if you like, that actually they'll just say at the last minute, you know what, we'll take it as it is.
Well, look, I'm not sure the Prime Minister is ever going to say thank you to the House of Commons taking control of the Brexit process. She has a very clear view. But of course, as ever with Brexit, there are all sorts of unintended consequences. And so there is no doubt that actually the fact that the House of Commons has already signalled, and probably will do so again, it won't accept a no-deal outcome to Brexit, is undoubtedly making people who want there to be a Brexit, in many cases they've campaigned for decades, think very carefully about what they do next week.
Today, an icon of the 2016 EU referendum Leave campaign, technology billionaire Sir James Dyson has announced his company is quitting Britain after Brexit. He'd already moved his manufacturing to the Far East and is now shifting the company headquarters as well. The company said it had nothing to do with Brexit itself.
So what would be the practical impact of a no deal? How much difference would it really make? And why is the Welsh Government, along with many business groups, so concerned that it's still on the table? If it is no deal by March 29th, many aspects of everyday life would change overnight. Initially, Britain would trade with Europe under the rules of the World Trade Organization. Our exports to the European Union would face tariffs, making them more expensive and therefore less attractive in European markets. The average tariff is likely to be 3.2%, but they could be much higher. Welsh lamb, for example, could face tariffs of 50%. UK service exports, like the City, could suffer more under WTO rules, which don't deliver the common regulations that many service businesses need. If the UK imposed reciprocal tariffs, the Bank of England thinks that could result in the cost of the weekly shop rising by 6%. New cars and clothes would also cost more, and trade would face customs checks, which could cause tailbacks at ports like Dover and Holyhead, where plans are in place for enormous lorry parks as the traffic stacks up. Bad news for fresh food that would start to go off, perhaps bringing shortages and higher prices. Even UK exports to 90 other countries like Mexico and South Korea could be affected, as they are covered by EU trade deals that would lapse for the UK. Most sensitively, the European Commission today gave an explicit warning there'd be a hard border in Northern Ireland under no deal, posing a threat to the hard-won peace settlement there. Add it all up, and the Bank of England fears a disorderly Brexit could knock 8% off national income in the first year, with house prices dropping 30%, the worst economic contraction in our post-war history. Though we would avoid paying the EU that £39 billion in the withdrawal agreement. Well, Welsh Government ministers have been outlining the potential consequences of a no-deal Brexit this afternoon. All other business here in the Senate was scrapped. Instead, there were a series of emergency statements on risks to agriculture, the economy, health and transport. Our Home Affairs correspondent, Andy Davis, is in North Wales tonight at the port of Holyhead. Andy.
Yes, well, welcome to Holyhead on a very windswept island of Anglesey. This is a major gateway to Ireland and vice versa. Several 100,000 lorries pass through here each year, 2 million passengers. And today the Welsh Government revealed that it was assessing sites nearby as potential standby locations for queuing lorries in the event of any delays following a no-deal Brexit. This on the day when they dramatically postponed business in the Assembly to line up minister after minister to paint a pretty bleak picture about what a no-deal Brexit could mean for Wales. It would be a disaster, said the First Minister. Another in his cabinet said it would have a profound impact on health and social care. UKIP, in turn, accused the Welsh Government of being scaremongering Remainers, causing the ill to feel paranoid about medical supplies, and they should hang their heads in shame.
Holyhead Port on the island of Anglesey, a major gateway to Ireland, and with several 100,000 lorries passing through each year, the UK's second busiest roll-on, roll-off ferry port. If the Welsh Government's right, this is another key location vulnerable to what it claims would be the catastrophe of a no-deal Brexit. At a local truck stop this afternoon, we met one haulier from Ireland who carries pharmaceuticals to the continent and worries about the impact of any Brexit-related delays. Presumably, if you've got pharmaceuticals